So on Monday night, our Baltimore City State's Attorney Ivan Bates spent several hours in front of City Council's Ways and Means Committee trying to make his case for a bigger budget increase in this year's fiscal budget. Bates is asking for an additional $800,000 in his budget, which has to be approved by the City Council. He says that the extra funds are necessary to bring in required resources to review all of the police body camera footage connected to their cases. He says that the evidence gathering takes up a lot of time and can slow the progress of prosecutors working on other cases. City Council members also had questions about his new citation docket starting this month to address low-level offenses, quality of life crimes, including several charges connected to dirt bikes. Now, when you see these offenses that are being targeted, it's clear to see who the real target of these policies are in this city. Let's take dirt bikes, for example. According to these new policies, you can be either fined or jailed for riding, owning, or allowing your child to ride a dirt bike. Dirt bike life and culture is as big a part of Baltimore's story and folklore as the Ravens or crab cakes. You can hate it or love it, but it isn't going anywhere. No matter how many fines you dole out or how aggressive the policy of policing around it may get, our kids aren't going to stop riding, and neither will some of the adults. The possession of and riding of dirt bikes being a finable or jailable offense is quite simply an act of aggression targeting our youth. This whole plan lacks imagination. And what it also lacks is a mechanism to stop it from being weaponized specifically against Black communities. When asked directly by City Council President Nick Mosby what his office is going to do to ensure that it's enforced fairly and equally throughout the city, Bates said that he expects his office to monitor the matter. What the hell is that supposed to mean to citizens of Baltimore? What the hell is monitoring the matter equated to as far as safety for our people and for our kids and for our neighborhoods in the past? The answer is simple: nothing. Last week, Bates unveiled his plan to resume enforcement of low-level quality of life crimes, including panhandling, disorderly conduct, disorderly intoxication, and drug possession. He made canceling a policy of his predecessor, Marilyn Mosby, not to prosecute these type of offenses, a centerpiece of his campaign. And now, for those of us in the community, there were plenty of things that we had to disagree with Mosby about during her time as state's attorney. We vehemently disagreed with her on many things, but that was one thing that she got absolutely right. There's no reason for us to be prosecuting or pursuing nonviolent drug possession charges and low-level quality of life offenses through citations and prison time. After hearing the particulars of this initiative, my first thoughts were, he can't be serious. He knows that we can't fine and arrest our way towards becoming a safer city. And we all know that these policies will hit the Black communities the hardest because of our past history with them. We'll end up doing what we always do, penalizing poor Blacks while the same things go unchecked in white neighborhoods. Now, according to Bates, the people who are eligible for this initiative will be offered social services and given the opportunity to do community service for a first or a second citation instead of facing prosecution. He says that if they complete the community service before their trial date, that the state's attorney's office will drop the case. The police are set to begin issuing these citations on June the 12th, just a few days from now. When prosecutors like Bates pursue policies like this, they're always evoking this deafening cry from the community for more accountability and tough on crime policies. Apparently, these are the cries that only him and those of his tribe of tough on crime advocates can hear. What he says is, across our city, residents have asked for a return to accountability in Baltimore. This initiative is the first step towards getting there. But my question is, who are the residents that he's referring to that are begging for more policies that don't work? Because in the hood that I live in, and in all of the ones that I represent, we may talk a lot about accountability amongst ourselves, but the accountability that we've been requesting has never been more policing. That's the one thing that we've been clear on, not helping our community or making us feel any safer. Problem with the framing of the policy is this. If you want to focus on violent crime, by all means do that. If you want to bring the murder rate down, there are effective ways of going about doing that. But this whole idea of legislating our way towards safety by instituting curfews and more punitive punishment for low-level quality of life offenses in communities where we're already struggling and drowning beneath the poverty line without any lifeboats in sight is not what's going to get us towards being a safer city. What it will do is put a lot more black people in harm's way of a police force that's already proven to be predatory and overzealous. Now, according to Bates, the police must first warn a citizen before a citation can be written, and then a citation can be issued next before an officer can consider arrest as an option. But who in their right mind living in the city of Baltimore would actually trust the discretion of our police department, especially with the evidence that we've seen over the past decade alone? And for those of you that are consistently trying to argue me down about this not being motivated by race, these citations damn sure won't be targeted towards the areas in our city where white people live. They won't be targeted towards the spaces where large crowds flock to every single weekend in the Inner Harbor and Fed Hill and Canton and Fells Point and Charles Village and Hamden, or any of the other spaces in the city where mostly wealthy, mostly white people dwell. This won't be where they're going to go to enforce this shit. This is going to be more of the same. This here initiative is strictly for the hood. And State's Attorney Bates has also said that the Sheriff's Department will be in the areas like Fells Point, focusing on open containers and public drinking through warnings and citations. But does anybody actually believe that the way that they'll be enforcing these laws in Fed Hill will actually be similar to how they enforce them in Down the Hill? Does anybody actually believe that? And all of this lip service and empty promises that we've been told too many times to still believe them aren't going to work again. In the past, whenever these citations have been handed down, they've always been issued disproportionately to black citizens and black communities in the city, especially in my hood in West Baltimore. City Council President Nick Mosby pressed Bates about this with his questioning during the budget hearing. Bates was quick to cite the fact that he himself is a black man, and because of this, his office will analyze data as a part of its initiative. He says that includes looking at where and to whom the police are issuing citations. My problem with that is that it's all reactionary. By the time his office is going through that data, citations will already have been handed out. By the time his office is going through that data, unlawful arrests will already have been made. By the time his office is going through that data, something tragic will surely have occurred. And his plan doesn't do anything to address that. Nothing about this plan is innovative or forward thinking. Again, as I said earlier, it lacks imagination. And in this way, Bates is playing directly into a perfect example of Einstein's definition of insanity, continuing to do things the same way and expecting a different result. If these citations had ever helped us in the past, if they'd proven to be anything but predatory towards black communities already on the margins, then you wouldn't be hearing all of this uproar from the communities that they're going to be exacted upon. And if you know all of this, if you know that it's never worked in the past, then what makes you think, Mr. Bates, that your special brand of law and order and tough on crime policy is any different than what we've already been organizing against for years? Think about all the returning citizens that are on probation or parole right now in our city that will end up being swept back up into the predatory prison system because of this initiative. This will feed the recidivism rate in this city, not combat it. Think about all of the police misconduct cases and wrongful arrest cases that will end up having to fight with taxpayer dollars because of these unnecessary interactions with law enforcement that are sure to be the result of this policy. And when you look at this initiative alongside the youth curfew that was just recently announced by Mayor Scott here in Baltimore, a dangerous trend starts to become apparent. A trend of criminalizing the existence of blackness in a city where we're not only the majority, but the lifeblood of this city that makes it go. And there are many that would think that it's a stretch for me to say that this initiative by Bates is criminalizing black existence, but when you look specifically at the way that he is targeting the dirt bike life and culture in particular, a staple of Baltimore folklore, it becomes apparent the way that he's choosing to criminalize and penalize black traditions like hacking rides or loitering. It's easy to see that there's a clear target here, and that target, unfortunately, is us. And also, similar to the mayor's curfew plan, the canary in the coal mine of this one by Bates is this initiative that he's doing where he's giving us something that we in the community have been advocating for. Social services and community resources being offered to people in need. But those services look a whole lot different to those people when being handed out by the same punitive justice system after fines and jail time have already been levied against them. If the goal was really to get services in the hands and houses of the people that need them, that by itself could have been the initiative, and that would have been an honorable thing. But to act like you're making our city any safer by further criminalizing and penalizing offenses like loitering or hacking a ride somewhere is laughable at best. And if it wasn't so sad, I'd be laughing my ass off. But the people most severely impacted by this policy will be my people in my neighborhood, in my community, my neighbors, my students, my loved ones. And that's no laughing matter to me. And frankly, it shouldn't be a laughing matter to any of us. When you look at this list of over 24 offenses that are included in these citations, none of these are offenses that in their absence make our community any safer. That was the focus of Councilman Christopher Burnett's questioning of Bates that session. And I tend to agree with his line of questioning. He basically was saying, you know, if these policies actually made us safer, I think that we would see fewer people in the community pushing back against it in this way. But it's just more of the same bullshit that we've already seen in the past. And quite frankly, it's just a bunch of band-aids that are put on top of shotgun wounds to distract from the real issues. And if I had to name my biggest issue with this initiative, period, my biggest problem is with Bates' response to the community's critiques of his plan. It's the way that he's deferred blame to other policymakers and politicians, like this isn't also a monster of his own making. A few days ago, I had a private conversation with State's Attorney Bates, where during that conversation, I voiced most of these concerns to him directly. And even in our personal exchange, brief as it may have been, he went out of his way to talk about the fact that these offenses were already on the books when he took office. Then he took to social media to once again state that these laws had been on the books for years. And he says very directly on his social media page that he's not the one that created these laws. The legislature did, which is a fair point to some. But he's happy to use his position of power to champion it, though. And that's something that he doesn't take responsibility for. He states that if we in the community think that the laws are unfair, then he urges us to contact our legislators and have them change the laws towards different policies, but not to blame him for it. What he leaves out of that statement, though, is the fact that he has the choice of discretion as our state's attorney whether or not to prosecute these laws, which is why he made a conscious decision to start prosecuting them again. He also spent a lot of time in Annapolis this past session advocating for tougher sentencing laws and mandatory minimums for youth, which kind of counteracts that statement that he just made. He's been in these spaces advocating for tougher on crime policies. And I've heard that he was packing rooms with people aligned with those tough on crime policies while he was out there. His ability to choose what to prosecute is the blame that he's trying to pass on to the other legislators, rather than standing on the fact that he intends to be locking up black folks like it's the 90s again. And to be fair, he is a prosecutor. As our state's attorney, he has a job to do. But the way that he chooses to go about doing that job will greatly impact our communities for years to come, quite possibly for generations to come. And we can't just let him dance around that responsibility like this. Our politicians are used to playing in the faces of our uneducated electorate, and we have to show them something different. They're used to being able to say things like, laws may very well be unfair, while immediately following it with a statement like lawlessness will not be tolerated. People like Bakes really expect us to be stupid enough not to see what he's doing. Our politicians have become pros at trying to appear to serve two masters, the community and the private corporate interests that are as heavily invested in police and prisons as they are capitalism and gentrification. We have to stop allowing them to get away with this while still claiming to represent us. We have to stop clapping every single time a black man is elected to office without understanding their true politics and how they will impact our community for better or worse. You can't allow them to get away with criminalizing poverty and blackness under the guise of, I was just following orders. No, you ran for a position of power so that you could make orders, not follow them. And you can't just conveniently, whenever the community is against something that you decide to do, act like you weren't a driving force behind it. At the end of the day, accountability is not a bad thing. But it seems like whenever we discuss accountability, it's impossible for us to seem to do so outside of the prism of policing and punitive punishment. When we talk about accountability, we very rarely talk about the accountability of our elected officials to their constituents. When we talk about accountability, we very rarely address the accountability of our institutions to our citizens and our neighborhoods. And if we're going to talk about the accountability of the people living in the neighborhoods like Sandtown or down the hill, then I think that we need to talk about the accountability of our politicians, elected officials, and community leaders that do nothing but pass blame from one office and administration to the other, rather than doing what's necessary to address the problems plaguing our city at their core. Now, in order for us to fight crime, we have to invest in people, not prisons. But in order for us in the community to force that to happen, we have to be organized and united in the way that we're fighting and in the way that we're trying to exert our plan of action. So it's cool to tweet and complain about things, but if we're not organizing to build real sustainable solutions to these problems that are scalable and replicable, then we're not really doing our job as citizens. And as I've said on previous episodes, I don't enjoy speaking publicly against any black man or woman, especially ones elected to public office, because I feel like there are a lot of folks that do that already. But what I'm also not comfortable with is turning a blind eye to something that, for me and my community, will be a problem for years to come. We're not helping ourselves by turning a blind eye to these problems and the systems and the individuals that prey on our communities. If we're going to overcome any of this, we have to be able to do it together as a collective. And that requires all of us being on code.